Welcome to Views from the Top. I am John Meehan, a partner at Arma Partners. Today, we're focusing on one of the most complex and fast-moving challenges in the global financial system, the fight against financial crime. At a time when AI, regulation, and geopolitics are evolving at pace. My guest today is Matt Mills, CEO of Ripjar, a company operating at the intersection of data, intelligence, and financial crime prevention. Ripjar's roots in national security and intelligence give it a distinctive perspective on how financial institutions are responding to increasingly sophisticated threats. Today, we'll discuss leadership and scale, where AI is genuinely making a difference versus where there's still hype, and what success could look like over the next 5 years. Matt, thank you for joining us today. Perhaps you could start by introducing yourself and Ripjar.
Absolutely. Hello. So I'm Matt, the CEO of Ripjar. Ripjar is a business that is on a mission to transform the world of anti-money laundering and also, very crucially, disrupt the economy of crime. And we have the honor of doing this for a large number of incredibly important clients. So 6 of the 29 GSIBs, so the most important banks in the world, as well as a number of the Fortune 500, everyone from companies in social media through to airlines, as well as intelligence agencies. Ripjar itself was founded out of GCHQ, which is one of the 3 main intelligence agencies. It's the one that effectively does the intelligence and listening part of intelligence gathering in the UK. And the goal really was to take that incredibly high quality view on understanding entities and the information about entities and allow businesses to make decisions based on the same kind of information and information processing.
And you joined Ripjar at a pivotal moment, new funding, rapid US expansion. What are some of the material things that have happened in the business since you joined?
Yeah. We've been incredibly fortunate that since I've joined, we've seen relatively substantial revenue growth. So very, very lucky that a large number of clients have either put their faith in us or continue to put their faith in us. And for that, we'll be forever thankful and we'll do a great job for them. So we've seen about 40% year-on-year revenue growth on our screening business, which is very healthy. I think, the other big change is I personally have been incredibly lucky to have worked with some of the best CEOs ever on my journey to being a CEO myself. So incredible people like Martina King, who was the CEO of Featurespace for a great number of years. And that kind of very high quality transparency, very high integrity leadership is something that I've brought into the organization, and so far the team seem to be seemingly liking working under the new leadership.
And you mentioned earlier the deep roots that you have, Ripjar, coming from the National Security and Intelligence Agency. How does that influence the way that Ripjar tackles financial crime, and how is that different to some of the other more fintech or soft or businesses that are coming more from a software angle?
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting question. I mean, fundamentally, the quality of the models have to be a lot higher, right? So we all have had experiences of a credit card not working because a anti-fraud system, one of the old generation ones, might have blocked a transaction. But very few of us have been arrested for terrorism, which is kind of a good thing, right? Yeah. And that's because I think if you come from that heritage, the accuracy, the pinpoint accuracy, and the ability to deal with incredibly fuzzy information really gives us a very, very unique competitive edge against our competitors. And that second piece is interesting as well. We've grown up in the world of unstructured data where there's huge amounts of information on entities. Not all of it is consistent. Not all of it always makes sense, but our ability to combine all of that information to really understand an entity and allow one of our clients to make the best possible decision is something why, or the reason why people come to Ripjar.
And if you look at the industry today, particularly the reg tech and financial crime industry, very crowded, a number of established players, but also increasing a number of startups, particularly coming at it from an AI perspective. How, one, do you see AI impacting the market, and what do you see as your defensive moat over the coming years?
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you look at how we use AI and models throughout the decision making journey, in terms of information at the front end on an entity all the way through to an investigation being completed and a decision coming out the back of that, there's a large number of steps and there's a number of different models and both machine learning and generative AI techniques used throughout that life cycle. On that blend of using the best bits at different stages, but also crucially having that traceability all the way through, is what we think gives us a real edge. Now, we have launched and have customers now using our screening assistant product, which is an agentic layer that sits on top of the investigation engine, and there's lots of really cool companies that are starting to do that. I'll be totally honest with you, that's not necessarily the battle we're fighting. What we're trying to do is make sure that our enterprises are able to make the best decision possible, and whether it's an human investigator or an agent making the best decision possible, we will be the ones enabling that. So a lot of what we're doing is traceability of decision making all the way through the life cycle, but also summarizing the information in the most accurate way possible so that an agent or a human can make that call.
And if you look at the market itself, there's clearly, as I mentioned at the onset, there's a lot going on from a geopolitical point of view. There's the whole evolution that's happening on the AI side. How do you see the financial crime market evolving over the next few years? And are customers ahead of the pack, or are they actually just running to try to catch up and stay in line with what's happening with the actual market itself?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, I mean, the good news is that the majority of organizations are doing a lot of stuff right. And so I'm going to take a very specific lens in my answer to this question, which is adverse media screening. So this is a large part of what we're doing, is we're collating information from a whole variety of different news sources and using it to have a very holistic view on the risk of an entity. Now, you might look and say, 78% of banks in the UK, for example, currently do this as part of their onboarding process, which is great. But you've got probably 66%, something like that, are still doing it relatively manually. So they might be using a search engine to do searches rather than having a more systematic process. And what's interesting is if you looked at something like transaction monitoring, chances are every bank that you speak to will have relatively good and robust systems and processes, but they'll still have some problems around things like false positives. But if you go back to the onboarding side, you'll find that it's a whole bunch of different point solutions combined with a relatively varied set of approaches to the media screening element. And that's where we see the biggest opportunity for banks to optimize, which is to have a far more systematic approach with a much better underlying model to build that holistic profile of the entity that you're doing business with, both across corporates and consumers.
And is that just building on that? If you look at the banks, the regulators, other customers, where do you think today they are underinvested from a financial crime point of view, and where do you think that they need to be investing more over the coming years?
I mean, selfishly, I'm going to say they're underinvested in adverse media screening, and that's where they need to be investing more, right? And my number is available, and so please drop me a note if you want to buy some software to do that. I think that's the obvious answer, but I think that the reality is it probably is some of those edge cases. I think the things that regulators say you must do this, I think generally speaking, people do very, very well. I think there's always opportunities to enhance the models that people are using inside the systems that they have today. But I do think that it's some of the edge cases where it's not necessarily currently a regulatory issue, but it's something where it's potentially exposing the organization to some kind of reputational risk or future regulatory breach. And one of the things, when you mentioned the sort of wider geopolitical climate, one of the things with the wider geopolitical climate at the moment is that rules on sanctions are moving around quite a lot, and who we're allowed to do business with and who we aren't, again, is moving around quite a lot. And so having a much more systematic approach to things that were historically slightly more artisan has to be a direction of travel for a lot of banks. Of course, the interesting balance in all of this is most of the organizations we speak to, their departments in particular are using AI and are particularly wanting to use AI with us. And what's great is that does have a lot of support from the organization, from the board, from investors. And so AI initiatives are being well supported, but often they don't necessarily think about the foundational information on which that AI is being processed. They're very, very focused on the output, and they're very, very focused on the models sat in the middle. But what we want to do is make sure that the information that those engines are using is as effective as possible.
And just again, talking about AI, obviously very, very topical at the moment. What do you think is genuinely transformative in AI as it relates to financial crime versus hype?
There were some recent announcements from Claude that was super interesting, doing some sort of case consolidation work to speed up AML workflow. There's innovations like that are genuinely transformative, right? So we're going to allow an investigator to be much, much, much more effective. And I think that's where we're going to see AI innovation make a huge difference, is investigators becoming much, much, much more effective. I think conversely, where I think it is overhyped right now is probably this world where you see fewer investigators. It could happen, but I think what we're much more likely to see, much like we see as leaders of technology companies, is we have the same number of engineers, but those engineers are just much more effective. They're able to produce so much more. And we love our engineers, and our engineers are brilliant, and they're embracing this amazing technology, and it's so good. And we feel that in AML, it's going to be very, very similar, with investigators just being like these super augmented humans that can achieve so much more with so much more accuracy.
And with so much going on in the market as it relates to both financial crime, AI, etc., how do you determine where do you invest the resources in order to make sure that they're monetized in the right way?
Yeah, it's a really, really great question. We have a very close relationship with our customers. And of course, whilst we do lead from the front in terms of innovation, fundamentally, any investment that we make comes from one of two places, either our investors' pockets or our customers' pockets. And our customers are very generously giving us money for investment they want to see in the platform. And that's driving a lot of where we're going. And we're super lucky that there's a degree of pre-selection insofar as by a customer choosing to work with us, they're already some of the most innovative banks in the world. So where they want to take the platform in terms of innovation is probably the leading edge of the market anyway, right? Just by virtue of the fact that we've been pre-selected by those organizations. So a lot of that innovation roadmap is very customer driven, but we do also have some incredible people on our leadership team that are also thinking about additional areas where we can bring the product.
And you look at the customers and a very impressive customer base that you have, but are known to be slow at making decisions. What are the triggers for a customer to decide we need to have a new solution, and what makes them choose Ripjar over other players in the market?
So there are a variety of different triggers that will cause someone to want to make that decision. I think that the most common driver is going to be either a fine in region from one of their peers, or it's going to be a change in regulation or a note from a regulator or something along those lines. It's also the case that some people are concerned by wider news. So we had customers contact us when there were certain data breaches to make sure that customers that they had weren't labeled in those data breaches, and so you will have some cases like that are slightly outside the norm, but mostly it's driven by regulator fines, changing regulatory environments. I think why they select us. So a lot of the time there is either calls to other banks in region that are already using the technology, or there will be pilots, POCs, those sorts of things. And what's great is the models do perform the best with us. Our accuracy is higher than with other firms. And so when we get into one of those head-to-head bake-offs, or they ask peers in the market about competitive evaluation, that's where we tend to win, just because the performance is a little bit higher. We are slightly more expensive, but we do have much better performance.
And you then look at compliance costs, for example, within a number of these institutions. I was reading the other day that for a lot of the larger institutions, compliance costs have increased fivefold, even sometimes tenfold over the last 5 years. Do you think that's sustainable, or do you think that technology is going to cap that now investment that's been made, particularly in people, and gradually enable costs to come down from a compliance point of view?
These are one of the most interesting questions, and actually it's very, very hard for me to predict which way it goes. Of course, there's the third element, which is tokens themselves become more expensive. So, and compute cost is quite high, and memory cost continues to be quite high. So I think in general, yes, that has to be the direction of travel, that the models become more effective, the augmented investigator becomes more effective, and the overall cost of running a large compliance organization has the potential to come down over time. But then again, it could also become a more complex regulatory environment. And so it's very, very hard to have a crystal ball on this one, because there are effectively two sides to it. And whilst we might make efficiency gains on one side, regulators could at the same pace increase the number of things that they expect banks and other organizations to be looking at.
And if you look at financial services, it's built, particularly with technology vendors, it's built largely around trust and being able to have more transparency over certain workflows and the output of some of the analysis that's actually been done. That has been heightened even more by AI, as there's this concern around what level of data it'll have access to, what it will be used for, etc. As you look at it and working with your customers, how do you get them comfortable with the trust point, with how the data is being used in order for them to ultimately decide that they want to invest even more with Ripjar over the coming years?
One of the great things that we have at Ripjar is really close relationships with our data providers, and our data providers have very good relationships with their underlying media providers. And so as a result of that, this is an area where actually we're pretty strong. And we also have this big advantage, which is if a customer has a particular data blend that they want to use, or a particular mix of different data blends they want to use, we can be super flexible with that. And so it's a great question, but we are not prescriptive on what data they use. We will work with different organizations, look at which regions they want to operate in, which sorts of customers they want to be looking at, and then we will work together to make sure that the data blend is effective for them, both meets any regulatory concerns or data privacy concerns that they might have, but also gives them the right level of information on which to make a really accurate decision.
So if we shift maybe a little bit to the company and the strong momentum that you've been seeing over the last couple of years as a company, what has been some of the key drivers of that momentum, and what are some of the key challenges that you've had to address?
One of the really great things about getting to join Ripjar at the stage of growth that it's at is actually they sold a number of slightly different things to a variety of different customers. And at this stage, we kind of worked out what works really well and what works less well. And means that we've been able to really double down and focus on where the software works exceptionally well. And that's adverse media screening and sanction screening. That combined holistic screening suite is really good. We still have an amazing intelligence product, and we still have some brilliant customers using that. But in terms of the speed of attrition of new customers, and we have over 300 now using the system, the vast majority by volume are using it for those adverse media screening and sanctions use cases. And as a result of that, we've been able to standardize an awful lot of the implementation process. We have a dual motion deliveries system effectively. So if you're a large enterprise with super bespoke requirements, then we can take you down one track. However, if you want the standard amazing, works brilliantly for 99% of customers like you, out of the box blend, then we have another delivery track that we can take you down, which is much, much, much faster. And that's allowed us to scale much more quickly. The other element is that we have some brilliant distribution partners. One of them, I won't say their name, but they're literally the building next door. They've been able to achieve phenomenal growth by bundling us into one of their core products. And so they've got this brilliant sales team who are out with really happy customers selling our product as well. And that's been able to achieve very, very fast growth without us having to do multiple additional implementations.
You've mentioned the great positioning that you have in the market, your fantastic customer base, the momentum that you have. If you fast forward 5 years, where do you see the financial crime market being, and what are some of the opportunities that you think Ripjar has over that period, and how will you try to succeed?
I love that question. I mean, if I could answer that question, I'd be a very wealthy man. I mean, the reality is, unfortunately, I don't know. I struggle to accurately forecast 18 months ahead at the moment in terms of where financial crime is going to be and where AML is. I think what I would say is we will want to be known as the most AI-enabled and most AI-enabling platform in the world. Inevitably, one trend that is going to be very, very prevalent is that investigation workflows are going to have a large amount of AI. In the same way today, you will struggle to find an effective development shop that doesn't have Copilot type functionality or AI functionality in their IDEs with their developers. The same is going to be true of investigation workflow. And so we want to be making sure that we're enabling customers to do that super effectively and in a very, very safe way. That's one thing. I think second thing is I can almost guarantee you that the world of financial crime won't have gone away. I've been working in fraud and financial crime, or anti-fraud and financial crime, for circa 15 years, and it is and always has been like whack-a-mole. You think you've stopped one type of activity, then it's the next, and then it's the next, and then it's the next. And with the increasing complexity and geopolitical situation going on right now, the reality is this is going to be a problem that just goes on and on and on.
And what are some of the assumptions you think that the market gets wrong about financial crime?
I think one of the big assumptions that the market gets wrong about financial crime pretty consistently is that the problems are never, ever, ever going to stay the same. It's kind of the exact opposite answer to the previous question in a way, right? Which is actually, if you look at what's happened over the last few years, there's been periods of time when certain solutions, certain vendors have arguably been slightly overhyped because there's been a belief that, well, that will end financial crime when we just solve this final problem, and of course, as soon as you solve this final problem, the reality is it just flows into a slightly different part of the chain. And so that's generally speaking where I see the market gets it wrong, is it has too much belief in the hype of certain solutions that often couple of years down the line haven't quite delivered the results that were expected, but certainly have delivered the project cost that was expected, and then some.
And if you look at Ripjar, it's seen very much as at the forefront of financial crime, really pushing the barriers. How do you continue to achieve that and making sure that you are still at the forefront in 2, 3, 4 years time?
I mean, at the end of the day, any business, and this might no longer be an en vogue statement given the growth of these phenomenal foundational AI companies, but any business is built on the quality of its people. We're super lucky. We have incredible people. We have the most amazing team. We have, across technology and innovation, we have the most phenomenal CTO. We have the most brilliant data scientists. We have amazing engineers, and we have people that are really devoted to going out and building just great technology and are always thinking about how they can make the models more effective. And there's some really cool innovation that's coming out at the moment, and what we do around classifying references to different types of criminality within news reports is really clever. It's really cool. It pushes the market forward, and that's innovation that's being developed in-house. So yeah, really, it's about having great people, and we're super lucky that we've got great people in the team.
Matt, thank you very much. It's great hearing about the momentum that the Ripjar has, your perspectives on the market, and particularly seeing such an innovative UK heritage company and how you've been so successful.
Thank you so much. Great to speak to you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Views from the Top, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.